Hey there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trinham, and I will be your host as always. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to let you know of a few things of note. First, you may or may not be aware that I host another podcast called The Third Seat. The Third Seat is unrelated to the podcast you are listening to right now, but if you'd like to check it out, then I will put a link in the description of today's episode that you can use to listen to it. If you like this podcast, then I really think you will like The Third Seat as well, so I highly recommend you check it out. Next, I want to let you know of a few ways you can support the podcast. First, be sure to tell a friend if you enjoy the show. Word of mouth is not only a great way to help support the show, but it's also zero cost. Secondly, if you enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a positive review is one of the best ways of not only supporting the show, but it also gives me direct feedback from you regarding how you feel about the show overall. I greatly appreciate if you decide to take the time to support the show in any of these ways. Finally, if you'd like to follow me or the show on social media, then feel free to check out the description of today's episode. Here you will find all affiliated and mentioned links, as well as how you can support the show online. As always, I want to thank you for tuning into and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed making it for you. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trinham. I will be your host as always, and I'm really excited to bring you all a new segment on the podcast today. I've been mentioning it a little bit on some previous episodes, and I've been working to kind of get the structure of how I wanted it to go, and I'm really excited to bring this new segment to you all today. So before we begin, I don't know if I have ever explicitly said this on the show, but I figured it would be appropriate for the time for this segment in particular. So I'm a Christian. I am a follower of Christ. I have been for some years now, and it's something that's very important to me, something that I routinely fall short at, but I try to do my best each and every day to follow the Bible as best I can and lead by example. And so today, my hope with this segment is to do just that. I hope to bring this segment in an honest way, in a way that hopefully provokes honest conversation. And whatever you, the listener, whatever your background is, whether you are questioning your faith, whether you are a Christian through and through, or whether you're not, whatever your background is, my hope is that I can bring this segment and that you can bring yourself to this segment with an open mind, with open ears, and a willingness to just hear the conversations that we have. And so today, I felt it fitting for the first episode to have an individual that I've gotten to know over the past, couple of months now, but an individual that I felt would be appropriate for the first episode of this segment. So, Mike, thank you very much for being on the show with me today. Yeah. So, for those that are not aware, do you care to just give a brief introduction of yourself and just what you do and where you are today?
Yeah. My name is Mike Soto. I'm the new to Chattanooga and Tennessee for sure. A totally different culture than we're used to. But the new minister here at Central, downtown Church of Christ. And so in Chattanooga, and I'm excited to be here. I have 6 kids, so I thought that's appropriate to say because that has a huge influence in my life.
I'm sure it keeps you busy.
Even in my faith. Oh, yeah, for sure. So, we're done. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to stay in contact with the 2 oldest that are married. And then we have a little one running around exhausting us, but
keeping you real busy, I'm sure.
That's awesome.
That's great. So, I've, gotten to know you. When did you officially come to or when was the first time you, I guess would be the correct word, you taught at Central, or the first time you preached here?
June 19th.
Okay, because it was a couple months ago. I
believe is the first working day. But as far as we tried out, got to know some people before that, a month before that.
I knew it was a couple months ago. It wasn't super long ago. And in hearing part of your story, just whenever I first came in contact with you, and the subsequent weeks and days and months following that, just hearing about you and where you've come from and how you have physically gotten here today. I've been very interested just to hear more of the details of who you are, how you got here, how you developed your faith, how you came to Christianity, and just what it means for you. So do you care to just dive into a little bit of just your own personal testimony and how you got to where you are today, and what that whole, the reflections on your testimony, what it means to you?
Yeah, sure. I'm 49, so it's going to be crazy.
It would be a good story then, hopefully.
I'll try not to do the preacher story. I can get long.
Hey, listen, we've got plenty of time, so you go into as much detail as you like.
So my faith, I grew up, well, we moved to Arkansas when I was 12, and so right in the middle of the Bible Belt from New Jersey. So there was some influence there for sure. And we went to church, but my family life was not good. And so it spurred my brother on, or he allowed it, I guess, to influence him in the wrong direction. And it pushed me to know God more. And so I started when I went to a Christian college for one semester and changed my major so many times they said you're undecided. So after that semester, I didn't know what else, so I just joined the military. So being in the Air Force for about 10 years. So I think in that initial stage, that one semester at Harding, I got connected with a really good group of Christians that really propelled me in the right direction. So going into the military, you can imagine being surrounded, the language, the culture, and there's some Christians there, obviously, but
it's a harsh reality to
be in. And so I purposefully, intentionally sought out being a part of a congregation, a church. And so at one point during my service, I met Andrea, my wife. And that was when I was really focusing on, man, I really want to be right with Christ. I want to know him personally. And so that was tough, being young and not having a mentor, not knowing what that looks like. And man, I'm thankful for the church. But I seen things where the focus has been, maybe the faith has been more, and maybe forgive me if it might be just me, but it's been more in church rather than in Jesus. And so even at an early time, I thought, man, I want my faith in him. I know him. I know that God, I think I had that trust. And so when I met Andrea, man, that's what she was about. Her faith was in him.
Now, was she in the military at this time,
No,
or did you just
no.
come across her while you were in the military?
I actually stuck a pencil on a map. So praise God there's no Google, because there was no way I would have went to that church if I Googled it. And it's in the middle of Trona, California, in the desert.
So is that like where you were stationed at the time?
Yeah, in Edwards.
Gotcha.
And so I drove 90 miles to Trona. I mean, deeper into the Death Valley area.
Just the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and when I had met her at a youth forum a year before, but thought she lived far away. So when I walked into that church, I saw Andrea, and I just couldn't believe it. So I was up there every weekend. I sold CDs, and I had a television. I sold it, you know, for gas money.
Now, were these CDs
music
were they of other people? Were these like original Mike Soto productions?
Oh no, these are like just music CDs.
But was it like music that you made?
No,
okay.
No. Yeah, I wish.
I was going to say, are these still in circulation anywhere? Like, can I get a copy somewhere?
No, my music collection I sold for gas money.
I gotcha.
That's when it really, really began to hit off when we were dating, because we were sharing, like, in 2 months we were engaged. So it went quick. We shared how much we wanted to serve God. And so both of us grew up in a strongly traditional background where once we got married, that's what we started having Bible studies, and we were with people on base, and we thought, is that what we believe? You know, we were challenged with our own faith, thinking, man, what does the word say? What is our faith really in? Because we were preaching or teaching people more church structure and not really what is essential.
Yeah.
So that's where it spurred. And my wife still is, I shouldn't say was, an incredible woman of prayer. And so having that dependence on God and trusting him, and when we read his word, we're leaning on that understanding. So over the years, it grew that way. I never wanted to be a pulpit minister. When I went to school for it, in fact, I got an undergrad in microbiology, pre-med direction, so that we could get like a tent making job like Paul. And plant a church in Portland. We did a lot of crazy stuff, so it's hard to. We went to Russia. We thought about moving to Russia because I speak Russian from my military service, I worked for NSA for a couple of years, and so we thought, well, we're not going to Russia. At one point, it just doors shut. And so we moved to Portland, Oregon, where there's 150,000 Russian speakers.
Really?
So we thought, yeah, we could.
Well, that makes sense.
We could plant a church there and start working.
Yeah.
And we discovered the majority of those Russian speakers already are part of really big mega Russian-speaking churches. So that option didn't seem to be, that door shut too.
Yeah.
Right? And the workforce, we could not. I tried so hard to get a job in Portland and ended up in the pulpit.
Really?
So working with the church. And
was it something that you kind of I guess I'll use the word accidentally stumbled into, or was it something that the opportunity was given and you felt compelled to do it, or was it more?
I think it was that. Well, the job market wasn't open, and we wanted to work with the church. Once we discovered there's churches up here, and one of them we attended, we were just plugged in. We got plugged in. We had small groups. It was just wonderful. The outreach that was taking place. And I looked at two churches, one in California and that one already had two other ministers. So I just felt like, oh, I know God wants us to take the California route because the need is there and not up there. So we did that, but there were some big issues. So we ended up going back to Portland and working with that congregation for 4.5 years.
So at what point in time was this?
That's 12 years ago.
Okay, so it was like, trying to do math. It's like 2010, I guess, if my math is correct.
2009, 2010.
Okay. And so at this point, this is when you started officially, like you were working as a minister in the church. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did it while I went to college, though.
Yeah.
In Texas.
Okay.
So there's a lot in between there.
Yeah.
When I did the pre-med, I changed Bible major to pre-med, and I was preaching full time during that time as well.
Okay. And so how long did you all stay in the Portland area?
About 4.5 years.
About 4.5 years. And so did you have any intentions of ever leaving there? Did you think like, this is probably where we're going to, at the time at least, did you think like, this is where we're going to stay? This is where we can see a long-term future here? Or was it more like a temporary place for an eventual means to an end somewhere else, do you think?
Wow, that's a good question. I think we planned on staying because we had bought a house and we had a lot of things we were planning on long future. So just events change. I did a lot of mission work, short-term campaigns to Ukraine during that time. And the congregation, a couple of the elders decided that that's not something they wish for me to do anymore. Yeah. And so because of that, it wasn't anything bad. We're still really connected to them. So we had decided to look for a church that would leave that option open.
Yeah. So you were there for, you said about 4 years, is that correct?
Yeah, 4.5 years.
So there for about 4 years, and then I know at some point, you just mentioned Ukraine, I know at some point you went there prior to coming here, you were in Ukraine for some extended amount of time. Was that where your travels kind of led you to next once you eventually left Portland?
Yeah, so we took on the idea, we wanted, if we were going to work in the pulpit, which I didn't really want, if that was the option, then we were going to work with smaller churches in the West and Northwest. We thought we want to be able to help churches that might be struggling. Yeah. So we worked in California and Washington State. And then during COVID, a Ukrainian family that we had known over the years. So I've been going there 10 years or 11 years to Ukraine. Or the specific city in Ukraine.
Were you going like back and forth, or were you like living in Ukraine?
Oh, back and forth.
Okay, gotcha.
Short-term campaigns.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
We got to know a family that were not Christians, and so they ended up sending an email saying, "Hey, would you consider moving here and teaching us about your faith?" Yeah, in fact, when I got it, it was in Russian. Yeah. And I translated it a couple times to make sure, is that really what they're saying? Like, maybe I'm missing something. Yeah. And so we took that as an answer to prayers. We were praying for some direction. And so we did it. We committed to going. And then 2 weeks later, we found out Andrew was pregnant with Pippin. So
wow. And so what point in time was this? Would you say it was around?
That was 2 years, or he's 18 months. So 2 years ago.
Okay. So right in the heat of
a little more
in the
than
middle of
2 years.
2020.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like? And this was prior to the outbreak of the war, but what was that like being not only in Ukraine, but being there in the middle of 2020, which was just a year full of so many unknowns. What was that like for just you and your family overall in your faith?
Well, we had, about 15 months that we were still in Washington before we went. So we went a year ago, September is when we ended up, or a year ago, August
Okay.
is when we moved to Ukraine. So we were only there for about 6 months.
Oh, okay.
So we got to Ukraine and we loved it. We were loving it. The culture, the people. The one thing that was new to us is that they had everything we have. They have their form of Amazon. They have, so people were very comfortable, which in the Christian walk and in evangelism is not easy.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people are comfortable, they don't need Jesus.
Yeah.
So we realized this is going to be a bigger battle than we thought.
Yeah.
Or not battle, barrier.
Yeah.
And so, but we were loving it. We loved the people. We loved going to the market to buy our groceries, getting to know the people, the vendors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but when the war started and our neighbors, it was like family. We would eat and have tea with them all the time.
Yeah.
And so that was a hardship for us when we left.
Did you feel like whenever you were there? So I would definitely say like you felt like you were, or did you moved there like to live? I know that sounds weird, like you moved to live there, like not
Yes,
just like
permanent.
back and forth.
Yeah,
so,
we sold 90% of our belongings before we left.
So how long had you been going back and forth between the West Coast to Oregon or the West Coast to Ukraine until before you officially decided, hey, we want to move over there and live there for what you thought was permanently at least?
Yeah, 2000. I would say the first trip was 2001. So 20 years. But to Mykolaiv, the city where we did move to, that was 10 years.
And whenever you started going back and forth over there, did you think that it was going to, at the time, did you feel like it was solely going to be a, like you said, campaigns, like, you go there and you come back, you go there and come back. Did you think it was going to stay like that? Or did you ever foresee you and your family actually moving over there to live there?
We wanted to move there. We tried. We went there on when was that? It's tough. I'm trying to think the time frame.
Yeah.
2011, we went there actually looking at consider moving there. So we spent a whole like a month and a half. Andrea and I and our son Isaac, we went with, and so that's when we really, we wanted to, but the door. I don't know why the doors seemed to shut, but it wasn't bad. We can go back and visit.
Yeah.
So we were doing that.
So now that you're removed, from that point in your life, what would you say, looking back, just on? And I know this is a sweeping question, and over the course of years, and so distilling this down will be, I'm sure easier said than done. But how would you? What is your reflections on your faith during that time? Whenever you were in Portland, whenever you were on the West Coast, going back and forth between there and the Ukraine, and then eventually moving there. What are your reflections on just that time in your life and how it impacted your personal faith?
I think seeing people. You'll notice I love pictures of street photography only because I love people.
Yeah.
And so I would say my faith was I started to really see what God I think sees in people, the need for them to have a relationship. And even in churchgoers, there's loneliness that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's where I realized, wow, I'm getting to see and feel what God feels. Like I started hurting more for people, and I actually thank God for that. I was so thankful that I was not turning inward and seeing, would I like it here, or anything selfish. It was really a plea to see. So I think that's when this couple said, hey, would you move here? It was like a no-brainer to Andrea and I. Yeah, we're going. We're dropping everything and going.
I think that's something that I've been trying to work on in my own life, and something that I've talked with some of my friends and peers is that, oftentimes we view, and this may just be like more of a Western thing, but we view the quote unquote the church as the building or the entity of the church, and understandably so. If someone asks you like, hey, do you go to church? Or hey, where do you go to church? Like you tell them a physical location, or you point them in the direction of where you go or where you gather. But I think something I've been realizing a lot is that, yes, that's obviously one aspect of it. That's how we describe where we meet as a church. But the church is more than just the building itself. The church is the people there within the building, and not necessarily within the building. The church can be anywhere. We see it in the Bible, and I'm sure you probably saw it in your travels, that whether you have a multi-roomed building like we're in right now, or whether you simply have the shade of a tree, whether there's two or more people, that's the church. And I think that's such an important part of really developing one's faith, is not looking at the church as the building or the corporate entity, but looking at it as people, as the individuals that go there, the lives that they live, and viewing the church as an opportunity to make an impact on those people. That's something that I think is really important, because when you look at the church as purely as the entity, or as the building, or as even the conglomerate of people, sometimes you can view it in a jaded way, where it's like, oh, it's just this place, or it's just this thing, which that is part of it, obviously. But I think it's more appropriate to view the church as the people therein, the people that make the church what it is, and the humanity of it. Once you're able to do that, and I'm not perfect at it, but once you're able to do that, it becomes a lot easier to do, like what you said, to really feel for people, to really empathize with them, and to feel the pain that they feel, and to celebrate the celebrations that they have. It becomes a lot more almost fun to do that. Like you said, like you become more energized when those moments arrive. And so that's something I've really been trying to work on in my own life. And I hope that, whoever hears this, or wherever you're at in your own life, is being able to view the church as, yes, the corporate, entity building of what we traditionally think of it as, but also understand that the church is made up of the people therein, Yeah.
I think one of the things, if I can touch on this, is our main goal when we went to Ukraine. One of the main goals of planning a church was that we were not going to have any American financial dependency on that when that church is formed. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a problem we saw develop. Mm-hmm. Not only is there dependency, but then control comes in a different way. And we wanted it to be a Ukrainian church, not an American church. Yeah. And so our goal was, we're going to plant it in a home, because they really, in a culture like that, they couldn't afford to have a building on their own without that support. Yeah. And I think we learned, they could have. In this time now in Ukraine, there is that possibility. So we were open to Ukrainians say, we don't really want to meet in homes. But we also want to stay away from a gaudy building or so much financial burden. Yeah. But the home church, to Andrea and I, that's just a huge thing for us, because it's a family environment that I think we do lose a little of. I'm not saying it's wrong how we have church now, but I think there's a benefit that's lost in the intimacy of a family. That's what church is. It's family. Yeah. No, something we've been talking about a lot, just me and different individuals, is what we do in the walls of a church is important, both for the people that are in it and the people that are on the outside looking in. It's obviously important. What we do in here is to my view, is if we are a cup, and in our lives we should be pouring some out and being filled up at the same time. Going to church, the action of being in the building, or being under the tent, or being in the home, wherever you gather, that should be a time where, in my view, your cup is filled, where you're allowing others, or you're allowing your experience to fill you up and give you encouragement and give you the knowledge that you need to go forward. But at some point, kind of to your point, it has to move out of those walls. It can't just stay in the church building itself. It can't just stay in that building, or under that tent, or in that home, even to a degree, if that's where you gather. Yes, that's an important part of it, but it has to move outside of those walls, because in my view, and I don't say this from a position of I've figured this out, or I'm perfect at it, or even that Central is perfect at it. No person or church is, but in my view, if we only stay here, if we only do the things that we do here, and never allow the church to move outside of these walls, into the communities that we're in, into the
the homes that are in our community, we're really missing a big part of the gospel in my mind. That's a big part. Jesus didn't meet with just the 12 disciples all the time. He met with them, and then they went out. They spread out, and they went out into the different regions they were in. And I think there's a reason that example was set for us.
Well, yeah, for sure. We're a light. We're a light to the world. So I would equate that to like, okay, I have this marriage issue, and say we want to make that better. Well, the question is, why do you want your marriage better? Why do you want your family to be this good family? What's the purpose of that? Just so you guys feel good. In Christ, now we want our marriage to shine. We want our family. It's very selfish to say, oh, we just want this tight-knit family, and we don't impact anybody around us. And the same with the church. We can get so inwardly focused. Ironically, you'd think that would build us up better and make us stronger, but what tends to happen is when we're inwardly focused, we end up bickering too much about nonsense stuff. Whereas if we're reaching out, oh man, you see spiritual growth that way.
Yeah, I think as well, another thing, if we as individuals and we as a church, if we're too inward focused or too focused on the things happening inside these walls, is it can cause, and I'm just as guilty of this as the next person, but it can cause us to be dependent upon what happens in the church building, which is not a bad thing. Like, whether it's you, did my mic just die? Oh, never mind, we're back. I don't know what just happened there, but whether it's you or some other minister or whoever, fill in the blank here with whoever's name. Obviously, when I hear you speak, whenever I hear whoever speak and preach, that's a time for me to take it in and to learn and to try and soak in as much as I can. But at the same time, I don't need to just rely on you or whoever, fill in the blank, for my faith. If I only rely on you, or even if I rely on a singular church building or a singular church structure for my faith, what happens when that's not there? What happens when that person is not around, or when you don't have the opportunity, like during COVID, when we may not be able to show up at church as we normally do? What happens then? Is your faith going to flounder? Is it going to falter and go under? Again, I'm just as guilty of this as the next person, but that's where, in my mind, the outreaching hand of your faith should come into play, where it shouldn't just be confined to the walls that you gather in. It should be, there should be limitless boundaries on it. I think that's something that can happen is oftentimes we become dependent upon the singular individuals or churches in our lives, which sounds like a weird thing for it to be an issue, because you want people to show up. You want people to show up and seek out the understanding and the knowledge that we hope that they need. But at the same time, you don't want that to be the only source of their knowledge and comfort and wisdom in how they rely on Christ in their life.
Yeah, I think a key verse for me, as far as faith and developing it in Jesus rather than in church structure or doctrine, more or less, is like 1 John 2:6 says, if we claim to be in Christ, we ought to walk as He did.
Yeah.
And so when we look at Christ, when you read and watch His ministry, it was about people. He would just reach out. He would care for people. He would go to those in need. And there's so much prophecy about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the blind will receive sight. Or even Isaiah deals with the Israelites not doing the things that he cared about.
Mm-hmm.
Looking out for the fatherless, looking out for those that are hurting.
Yeah.
Releasing the bonds of, he would say. So that's, I think my faith has grown whenever I look at Jesus more. Mm-hmm. And it just really appreciation for His people, mm-hmm. and the people He desires.
I think it's interesting too, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, but if you look at the 12 apostles that went with Jesus, they were all different in a lot of ways, but the ways that they kind of the way that their faith was fueled was in different ways, at least in my mind. You brought up Paul. He was a lover of the people around him, and not to say that the other apostles were not lovers of those that were around him, but in almost all of his letters, in the stories we see of him, he is constantly, he opens up a lot of his letters, talking to the different churches and individuals that he's writing to, saying things to the tune of, I pray for you constantly. I'm so grateful that you're in my life, and I'm so grateful that you have made this impact on me, and I hope that I've had a positive. Like he's giving them the credit where it's deserved and trying to encourage them. And even when whether he's critiquing a church or whether he's encouraging a church, it's always from a standpoint of him wanting to see them excel. Right. And I think that's interesting to see that Paul had this great, and even when before he became a Christian, he was this man of great intensity for the people that were in his life at that time. He was against the church before he became a Christian, and he had this great intensity to work for those that he felt were doing the right thing at that time. And so you see that through his life, how he was able to use that passion in a positive way. But then you contrast that to someone like Peter, for everything that's said about Peter, he, especially after, just while Jesus was on earth and even after, he was just a incredible, he sought after Jesus in every way of the word. He would literally go to battle for Jesus. Like he would almost be a little too forthcoming when it came to that. But he would be eager to hear every word from Jesus' mouth. He would want to be around him as much as he could and just soak up as much stuff as he could from Jesus. And I think that goes to show that whoever, and there's more examples than just those two, but it goes to show that we are all given, wherever your background is, we're all given different aspects of ourselves that when focused in the right direction, when focused on, in my opinion, when focused on Christ, it becomes much more fun and a lot easier to do the things we need to do. If you're someone like Paul, then focus on those that are around you. Focus on the people that give you the strength to want to exercise your faith. For him, he wanted to cheer on his brothers and his sisters. He wanted to help them grow. If you're someone like Peter, then focus on Jesus, like what you were saying. Really dive into what he had to say, dive into his actions, and focus on him, and let that be where your strength comes from. I think just wherever you are, whatever builds you up and gives you strength, that's the thing you should focus on to allow your faith to continue to grow as you move forward.
Yeah. And I think for sure that's what Andrea had helped me with. Mm-hmm. Seeing her faith. Mm-hmm. Early on in our marriage, it was great. Even though those first couple of years of marriage can be tough. Ironically, we sat with an older couple and they said, after we had shared our difficulties, they go, "You guys claim that you follow Jesus, yet when you hear these things that you're upset about, what's that sound like?" And man, it hit Andrea and I so hard. Mm-hmm. We realized, I'm so selfish. Yeah, and so that helped our marriage, and then just growing with a focus on Jesus. I think many Christians, not sure they have that focus. They have this focus on, I want to be right with God. I want to do these things. I want to go to church. But when you're following him and looking at him, he'll mess you up in a good way. Yeah. And so I love it. I love even Paul. James 5:17 says, Elijah was a man like us. Mm-hmm. So when we look at Paul and Peter and these apostles that were with him, they made mistakes. Even Peter gets called on the carpet by Paul for being racist. I don't know if that's the right word. He's like, I can't talk to these Jews, these Jewish converts. And Paul really gets onto him for it publicly. And so these are men like us. Mm-hmm. And so it helps me. I can have a faith then. I can see God working in me and trust him to do that and not on my own power. Yeah. And I think you'll see God do that with this Spirit is in us. So we start to feel and we start to see as God does. Mm-hmm. If we allow it, I think we can grieve the Spirit and not permitting him to work. Yeah. And so we see Paul's anguish in Romans 9. He even lays it out. I'm not lying. The Holy Spirit bears witness. God knows. He lays out three things just to show he's not exaggerating. And he says, I wish myself condemned that these Jewish brothers of mine would come to Christ. Mm-hmm. That's how he pleaded for those not in Christ. Mm-hmm. I thought, man, am I there? Am I there yet? That's what I want. I want to to where I would be willing to give up my life.
Yeah. You think of, I forget where it is in the Bible, and you could probably tell me, but when Paul is talking and he says, I'm pulled in two different directions. He says, on one hand, I want to be with Christ in heaven. I want to be with him, and to leave this world and to go, and be with Christ, and be with him. On one hand, that is truthfully where I want to be, but in the same token, I want to be here with you all. I don't want to leave you all, with work still to be done. I want to continue doing what I'm doing. And, it's, I don't know, it's crazy to see just the passion that he had, and the love for those around him, because even to that extent, he would go on to say that, if it came down to it, like, he would lay his life down for those that were around him. And he wasn't necessarily talking about the other disciples, the other people that he was really close with. He was just talking about his brothers and sisters in Christ in general. That's right. Just the people that he knew and the people that were, considered themselves to be Christians. He would say how, I care for you so much and I have such a deep love and affection for you that I would go so far as to lay my life down, because I know that whether I live or I die, it's a gain for Christ overall. And like you said, like, would I be willing to do that? That's such a huge example to set. But then at the same token, like you said, they were normal guys just like you and me. They were normal everyday people. They were, people not working, they weren't the elites of that day. They weren't the high class of that day. They were just everyday individuals. And so what that tells me is that I certainly fit that bill. I imagine people listening to this fit that bill. But even if you don't, wherever you fall in your life and in, the social structure of everything, it doesn't matter. Wherever you fall in that category, you have the opportunity to love and live like Paul and like these disciples and like Christ did. And I think that's incredibly encouraging, because Lord knows that I fall short more than I should. And so still having the opportunity and the grace to pursue something higher than myself is incredibly encouraging. And just knowing that it's still within reach is great to know, for me personally.
Yeah. I think we see in them and in ourselves as we grow that Jesus is real.
Yeah.
When Jesus is real and they finally get it, you see him move.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way. That's the only possible way that Paul could say those things and mean it.
Yeah.
Is if Jesus was everything to him.
Yeah. No, I certainly believe that. So taking it in a little bit of a different direction here. So I want to go back a little bit to just where you were before you got here. So what was it like? So you said you were in the Ukraine for maybe 6 months or so, 5 or 6 months. Mm-hmm. So what was it like for your family once the war officially broke out and everything that came with that officially was borne onto your all shoulders? What was that like for you all in trying to figure out what to do next? And how did you eventually find your way physically here in Chattanooga?
So, oh, wow. There were hints of it, Russia building up forces right before we moved.
Yeah.
But really, everyone thought it was a localized, that whole Donbass region where they've already been having war since 2014.
Yeah.
So we moved with confidence that nothing would take place. And then once things really got heated in December, I would say November, December timeframe, when the embassy started saying, yeah, we recommend everybody leaving, that was a little unnerving. And then seeing the ships come into the Black Sea and things like that. So we really took counsel with the Ukrainians. And we had a family already meeting with us in our home as a church, a Ukrainian family. And they're like, oh, no, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not our region. It's only in the far eastern region. And he's just flexing his muscles, Putin. That's what everybody thought. So we just stayed. And then the more the pressure mounted, hey, Americans need to leave. We still listen to the Ukrainians. And Andrea's like, wow, God brought us here. Everything happened so smoothly for us. We had our support. We sold all our stuff. We went. Things were going great. So we just assumed, oh, God's with us. We're going to stay. And Andrea had no desire to leave. I'm the only one. I think it was because I'm a father and a husband, and I'm thinking all these things. And my background, working in the government with Russian intel, kind of really sparked, I need to leave. Because even the Ukrainians are saying, well, if Russia does take over, it might be better for us. And Mykolaiv, they felt that way. They really felt, in general, the people felt like...
Where is the name of that city? What did you say it was?
Mykolaiv.
Where's that located in Ukraine?
Center on the very southern south. It's hour and a half, 2 hours drive from Odessa, east of Odessa.
Okay.
People are familiar with Odessa.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what took place. It was this anguish of what do we do? What do we do? And I remember hearing some blasts on the first night of the war. And I thought, no way.
Yeah.
That coincidence. I didn't think it was any. I went upstairs and looked out the window, and I saw it I want to say, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning. And I saw a huge flash of light. And then, like, in my mind thinking, what was that? No way. And then, like, 15 plus seconds, I don't know how long, I hear the blast.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought, okay, it's real. Something's happening.
Yeah.
And the next day, people were all the rumors, everybody's talking, there's tanks coming in. Actually, they tried to bomb an airport pretty far from Mykolaiv. And then currently now, Kherson is the region that they were really attacking that night. And they're still trying to take that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what happened each night. The blast started getting more and more throughout the night. And, oh, man, I praise God our kids slept through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a water heater that was tankless, and every time it fired up, oh man, it would get me because I thought, so I knew I was already having PTSD.
Yeah.
But we were doing good. I remember Harding, it's a Christian university, reached out to us, so we had a Zoom meeting with them. A lot of people were reaching out and praying, and no one actually was angry that we were staying. That's what we expected.
Yeah.
But it got to a point, okay, we're leaving when we can.
Yeah.
We're going to pray, and if God brings someone, we're leaving.
Yeah.
Because we were in a city that was surrounded by bridges. And at this time in the war, we're going into the second week of the war, they had all the bridges up so that the Russian tanks couldn't come in.
Yeah.
At one point, there was about 800 tanks surrounding the city.
The city that you were in?
Yeah. So we were.
I just can't even.
Oh, man. The city shut down.
The thought of what that. I just can't even imagine that.
I still can't. And we were in it. Our minds were not processing things. We knew at this point, our mission really is shut. The city was shut down. So I remember one day, the entire day, I was on the phone constantly. Different people in America, different people in Ukraine, trying to get us out of Mykolaiv. And they couldn't. We couldn't get anybody to Mykolaiv because of the Russian armies surrounding it. And we couldn't get out. And I remember one guy saying, you need to go knock on every door and have someone drive you out of there. I thought, why would I put a Ukrainian's life in danger who's not a Christian? And if we die, we're going to heaven. So we were not about to do that.
Yeah.
I just told him we're not doing that.
Yeah.
He goes, well, I can't help you. And I said, well, then God will.
Yeah.
So we dealt with that quite a bit. It was frustrating. And then one guy called and said, hey, you have 5 minutes. The bridge is coming down. We're going to take you. And just a small carry-on bag for each person. There's 6 of us.
So you're packing your life into this.
We sold everything in America, and then we rebought, some things.
Yeah.
So we just threw warm clothes because we heard you could be in the car for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And it's cold. And we had a baby. It was chaos. Jeez. Well, the guy shows up in this small Subaru.
Yeah.
And there's 6 of us. And so we thought, no way, 4 or 5 days cramped in that.
Jeez.
But he ended up on the way to Odessa, which is about an hour and a half, which is crazy. He risked his life to take us. We saw tanks, we saw things. And on the way there, this guy calls in Ukrainian. He's on the phone. So I'm speaking Russian. I don't speak Ukrainian fluently. I speak Russian fluently. So I was speaking to him in Russian. And I thought, I don't know who this guy is. So I hung up on him. And he said he was going to meet us in between Odessa in a car. He wanted to know what kind of car we had. So I was a little spooked.
Yeah.
And this American calls back. Why'd you hang up on him? He's your ride. So this was a Ukrainian special agent that they were going to meet us in Odessa and take us to the border of Romania.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh man, I hope he calls. I hope I don't lose signal.
Yeah.
And so the guy called back. I gave him to the driver, and the driver was a little spooked too.
Yeah.
He didn't understand what was going on. So after the phone call, I explained to him what was really going on.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to Odessa. We had to go through checkpoints. We got to Odessa, and this guy picked us up in a smaller car.
Jeez.
But they're long, miles long, days wait on these checkpoints.
Yeah.
He just went, he didn't wait in line. He went around the line, and they let him through. So he did know something. They didn't check our passport.
Really?
So we went 6 hours where it was taking people days.
Wow.
So it was a huge answer to prayers. Things went, but we saw things. We saw a fighter almost get shot down. It let all of its chaff out. There was crazy things our kids saw.
So you were like, while you all were in the car driving, you saw like,
yes,
just like looking out the window, you were like, oh, there goes.
Because we had left Odessa, and they were supposed to attack that night in Odessa.
Yeah.
From the ships, but we didn't know fighters were flying.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw this chaff come out of the jet, and then this rocket launched.
Yeah.
And hit the chaff. It missed the jet, and the jet got away. And my driver, he just floored it.
Yeah.
He panicked. I was in shock, I think. I thought, I can't believe we've seen this.
I would not know what to think if I witnessed anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't know what to think if I saw a fighter jet fly by me regardless. But then to see that...
See, I was used to it like on training in the military and then also even, in the Air Force. For a couple of years, when I worked for NSA, we did radar systems.
Yeah.
And so our fighters would fly against them. So it felt like that.
Yeah.
It didn't feel real.
That's crazy.
So once we got to Odessa, or once we got to Romania, we stayed the night with this guy's aunt in a remote village on the border. Mm-hmm. And then early in the next morning, he took us right to we didn't have to wait in line. He took us right to the border.
Yeah.
And we got across. So
when the border of
Romania.
Okay, Romania, gotcha.
And a missionary that we had contacted during that time period drove 4 hours and met us and took us to Bucharest.
So then from Romania, did you fly back to the States, or did you stay in
No,
Romania
we had a lot of people saying, take your family. Like in Italy, there's a Bible school there. Mm-hmm. So some people from Arkansas said, hey, it's all secured. Go there. You have a housing and all food. Stay there as long as you want, but give the kids a good distraction. Mm-hmm. So we saw Rome. We took the kids to Florence. It was in Florence is where this school was, where we were staying. So we were able to see Italy. Yeah. And then we stayed 2 nights in London. We stayed there about 10 days. Yeah. And that's a weird thing too. The director of that Bible school, he picked us up, and I thought, I know you. Yeah. His name is Zach. I'm like, man, why do we know each other? Yeah. Both of us, it was driving us crazy. When we were in Portland, we had 40 college students come up to do a campaign, like a work party campaign. Yeah. Like we're building houses or painting houses, tearing weeds. And Zach was an intern at that church that came up. Really? And so he was on my team. I was like, no way.
And so he was in Italy?
That was 10 years later. Yeah, he's a director of this Bible school. So it was such a small world. It was a cool connection. And then, so we had a lot of awesome visits and talks. Yeah. And we learned how difficult it was, more so in Italy, for them during COVID than it was for us in America. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize how shut down they were. And he talked about that quite a bit. So it was good for the kids. Everything, our kids, man, they're so resilient. Yeah. And it was a blessing. We made a YouTube video of them answering 2 questions because Andrew and I wanted to draw out of them. This was in Romania we did it. We wanted to know what's in their mind, so we did it candidly, and they couldn't hear each other. Yeah. And so I made it into a YouTube video because Andrew and I were blown away. But the questions were, what was the worst thing that you feel about leaving Ukraine? And man, it blew us away, this YouTube video, what they were saying. And then the next question was, where did you see God in this? And so, man, yeah, it was awesome. So there were things that we wanted to draw out of them, how they're dealing with it, what they're doing with. Yeah. God has been a really, really big blessing in that. So then we came to the States.
Yeah. And so did you have any kind of like plan were you just thinking we're going to come back to the States and figure it out once we got there? Or did you have some kind of working plan in mind of what you were going to do?
Well, we knew for sure we were going to stay a month with Andrea's mom, mainly because right before we went to Ukraine, her dad died unexpectedly. And so it was like almost on the year anniversary of that death.
Was this in where was this at?
In California.
California. Okay, gotcha.
And so we spent a month with her mom. And then it was time for Isaac to get married. So we went and did that in Arkansas. We went to Arkansas for a month. And during that month, we were interviewing and trying out at a couple churches, and Central being one of them.
Nice. And here you are now.
Yeah, crazy.
That's crazy.
So we still process things because that was like a fresh church plant in a home. And then all of a sudden, we're back into this structure, which isn't wrong.
Yeah.
But it took some time for me this last couple months to really get set in that mindset.
Do you still have any way of keeping in contact with the people that you were in touch with in Ukraine?
Via Telegram. Now I'm down to about 6 of them. At first it was about 15 that I was constantly talking to, but I regularly speak to 6 of them. So some of them are still hunkered in their cabins. They have a cabin. Yeah. They're just stubborn. They don't want to leave. And so they're staying. And I can't imagine, this is everything my whole life, living there. And why would I, they don't want to live as a refugee. So
that is just the things that you've described and just the things that I've seen. And, as this has all been playing out, it's just, I don't understand, I cannot fathom what that would be like living through that, both from the perspective of you being someone who was leaving when that broke out, and also the perspective of an individual that is from there that has decided to stay there. I just can't imagine what that is like.
Well, Alora, her statement was, this is what's crazy. She goes, what's the worst thing about leaving Ukraine? She said, well, when I see the people there, they leave the husbands could not leave the country, or brothers, any young man under 65 can't leave. Yeah. So women and children were leaving. And it says they were leaving their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, and we didn't. We were all together. And that's what bothered Alora. So things like that, this young lady, this young girl saw that, noticed that. Yeah. So those are things that, I can't imagine. Yeah. Andrea and the kids leaving, and I'm staying there. Yeah. Now almost a year. Yeah. Or 6 months, 7 months into the war. Yeah. It's crazy.
So you're now here in Chattanooga. What is, looking back, just as we're kind of beginning to wrap things up here, what are your thoughts just on everything you've laid out here? I know that's a lot of things we've talked about here, but what are your thoughts, one, on just where you've come, how you've gotten to this point, and two, where would you say that you personally are at with your faith right now in this moment, just regarding everything that's happened leading up to this point right here?
Yeah, the faith, I think, is in trusting Him. Not knowing when things are really, circumstances are uncertain. I know that He's got us. Yeah. 10, 15 years ago, I think this could have crushed me a little bit.
Yeah. Understandably so.
But now I'm confident. I don't feel hopeless or lost. Where He's using me or how He's going to use me, that is definitely in my prayers constant. And I think implementing small groups here in Central was huge for me because we come from that as our main church. So we have a big collective body. We meet on Sunday in our gathering. But now that we're meeting in small groups and then seeing you guys, your college and post-college group, how often they get together, that's what we're seeing in Scripture. It's coming alive. Yeah. So in one way, this is exciting to me, not having seen that in other places. I feel like this is a huge blessing that God has given to Andrea and I and our family to be put in a place where we get to see some of that. Yeah. We want the whole church there. We want all generations implementing and exemplifying what you guys are, or seeing what you guys are exemplifying. So that's maybe my goal now, my mission now here at Central is to get the whole church, our whole family being this way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. Just in the short time that I've gotten to know you and hear from you, and just now hearing more in depth about your experiences and how you've got here, you individually seem to just have this great, just excitement. From my perspective, just excitement not only just for your own personal faith, but like what we've been talking about, just with the people that you come in contact with every day. You're an individual that just is driven by the individuals that are around you and by the faith that you have inside you. And so I definitely think that everything you've just laid out definitely is seen through your daily action and the things that you do. And I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to have our paths to have crossed, and I'm glad to have you here.
Oh, I am too. Thank you.
Yeah. Before we finish up here, we got just a few more minutes here. I'd like to do this is kind of a little bit of a tradition with the show. Every interview I do, I always like to end it off on a little bit of a fun segment at the end. Totally unrelated to everything we've just spoken about, but I always like to do this just to hear from you, just to hear a little bit about you. And so this segment that I like to end everything with is called 15 Quick Questions.
Oh, wow. All right.
And these are totally unrelated to everything we've just been talking about. But these are going to be this or that questions. So, either A or B, things like that. So I just want to hear the answers off the top of your head and hear what you have to say. So does that sound good to you?
Yeah.
All right. This is 15 Quick Questions with Mike Soto. First and foremost, beach vacation or mountain vacation?
Oh, mountain vacation.
Hot coffee or iced coffee? Or if you're not a coffee person, you can substitute
coffee.
tea. Hot coffee. Summer, fall, winter, or spring?
Fall.
Sweet or savory food?
Savory.
Are Crocs fashionable? Yes or no?
Supposed to be first. As a dad, I would say yes.
Yes,
for sure.
I think that's the correct answer in my opinion. Pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Nice. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Guacamole or salsa?
Oh, man. Both. Guacamole.
Would you rather do a movie marathon or a TV marathon?
Movie marathon.
Nice. Crunchy peanut butter or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy.
New York style pizza or deep dish pizza?
New York.
Who do you think would win in a dance battle, The Rock or Kevin Hart?
Kevin Hart.
Which decade do you prefer, the 70s, 80s, or 90s?
Whoa. That changes. 90s.
We are entering the end of the year, so which is your favorite of the end of the year holidays? Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or New Year's?
Which is my favorite?
Yeah. Or which do you prefer?
Thanksgiving.
And finally, the last question, I ask everybody this, and so I want to not only hear your answer, but I want to hear your rationale, your thinking in this. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
100 horse-sized ducks. No. Duck-sized horses.
Yeah. Ducks.
Oh my goodness.
So you'd rather fight 100 duck-sized horses?
Yes.
So what's your thinking regarding that? What's your strategy here?
I can do that.
Yeah.
I just can't do the big one. Are you kidding me?
You think you can take on 100 duck-sized horses?
Oh,
100 small horses?
If I had a good weapon, a sword, I could do it. Just cut their legs out.
I like it. I get a different answer every time, and I hear some people say, I prefer one thing. Like I think I'd get overwhelmed by a lot of things, so I'll take the one big duck or things like that. So that's hilarious. Well, thank you very much for playing along. I always like to end each interview off that way. Before we finish up, I want to just say thank you very much for doing this. I know you're a busy individual, and I know that this is kind of a new segment for the show, but I just felt that you would be a great individual to kind of kick this segment off with. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me, and just thank you for all that you've been doing. Before we finish up, is there anything else you think the listeners should know? If there's any links that you think they should check out, or anything affiliated with just the church, or anything in general that you'd like them to know about?
Wow, I'm off of social media lately, so I don't know. But I'm appreciative of you. Mm-hmm. I wish the listeners could see the group that you guys have, mm-hmm. Especially what's coming on tonight, the Encounter group. Just the devotion mm-hmm. to grow and help one another, a community. Mm-hmm. And so if you're out there, if you're listening, man, build a community where you can actually reach to other people. There's too many lonely out there.
I agree. Well, Mike, I want to just say again, thank you very much, just not only for doing this, but just thank you for everything you do. I know with here at Central specifically, David was here for a very long time, and with him, stepping down and moving into a different role, we were looking for the right person, and you've been a great leader and a great individual, and someone that I've been very happy to have just in my life. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being on here, and I appreciate you, just everything you do.
Cool. Thanks.
To all the listeners out there, I hope that you enjoyed this new segment. It's something new for me. It's something that I've been looking forward to doing, and I hope that you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, feel free to leave a 5-star review if you'd like for the show, wherever you get your podcasts, or feel free to let me know your thoughts. The contact for the show is radiofacepod@gmail.com. You can feel free to send me your thoughts anytime you like, or you can find myself or the show on social media with links in the description of today's episode. But with all that out of the way, Mike, again, thank you for being on the show today. To all that are listening, thank you for listening and supporting the show. And I will catch you all on another episode of the podcast. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. As one final reminder, if you'd like to support the show, then don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast, or share it with a friend. If you'd like to check out any links that were mentioned during the show, or follow the show or myself on social media, then feel free to head to the description of today's episode to find these links. As always, thank you again for checking out today's episode, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you all on the next episode of the podcast. See ya!